thought he came across really well, as he always has done, really. Whenever we've seen his press conference, mainly at Chelsea, he's got charisma, he's got a personality. I think you could maybe see the difference when he's speaking to the media, maybe compared to sort of Lee Carsley in these last few weeks, who looked at times a little bit uncomfortable. And he's just got that confidence in himself that comes with top managers, that, you know, he's not terrified that every word that's coming out of his mouth is going to end up maybe on the back pages or the front pages. You know, he's got a confidence in himself, answers the questions, you know, really openly. And yeah, he seems like he's a good fit, certainly in terms of dealing with the media.
Well, we're just hearing from Gary there, agreeing that Tuchel does, in fact, tick all the right boxes for the role. Slightly, though, he said, disappointed the FA had decided to go down the non-English route. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I agree with him. I mean, when I say disappointed, I'm not bothered either way. I must be totally honest. I'm not the most patriotic of people, and you know, the England manager has to be this. It's not just about England. My feeling is that it's international football. The whole point of international football, certainly with the major nations who compete for the tournaments, is that it's your best v their best. Now, club football is different, and we love it. You know, different nationalities, different coaches in the Premier League or the Champions League level, and it's a real mix. But, you know, the thing that makes international football different from the club game is it's, you know, people from your country. I know that's skewed a little bit with players, and maybe they weren't born in the country, or it goes back to maybe the grandparents. And I also understand certain nations having a foreign coach who's going to have an influence on them that will drag the whole footballing structure up with them and pass on his experience and expertise to all the coaches throughout the system and the country. But when I think of England now, we're so close to winning a major tournament, and there's so much good work got into, you know, producing these players, St George's Park. It just doesn't feel right to me that we have a foreign coach. And again, it's not just about England. I don't think Italy should. I don't think Germany should. I don't think France should. Portugal have at this moment in Roberto Martinez, which I find strange. So, yeah, that's my take on it. I'm not going to lose any sleep on it. Over it, but England have got a brilliant manager. But I think England should have an England manager.
What about the contract length? It's going to be 18 months, starting in January. So, is this World Cup or bust with this appointment?
Well, to be honest, I think maybe we've been slightly different from other nations in the past, where we maybe giving England managers maybe 4-year contracts, and when you look at other nations, more often than not, they're on a 2-year cycle, and maybe that's what we're just looking at right now. It's just, you know, we'll see how it goes between now and then. We're bringing him in because we think we've got a team in this next 18 months who can win the World Cup, and I think it probably works for Thomas Tuchel, because if we're being totally honest, I think Thomas Tuchel would rather be coaching one of the biggest clubs in European football right now than maybe managing the England team. He's not used to sort of not having that day-to-day involvement. It's new for him as well. And the fact that it's an 18-month contract shows that he's probably thinking, I'm going to give it everything to try and win the World Cup. But, you know, I want to get back into club management. I can understand that, because the best managers in the world managing the club game. And there's no doubt for me that Thomas Tuchel is one of the top managers in world football. And England have got a great coach. There's no doubt about that. But I've never been a huge believer that international football demands the absolute elite coaches to make sure your country wins. I actually think international football is more about the players. I actually think club football is more around the manager. And I think the last two managers who've won international tournaments in Spain and Argentina, going into those tournaments, very few people outside of their countries have been able to tell you who the managers was. And that probably tells you, for me, that my opinion is probably right in that sense right now. But yeah, I would have expected to be a little bit longer, but maybe it obviously works for both parties.
Yeah. What about this incredible crop of young players that England has, that he's got at his disposal now? Is, you know, will his experience with some of the biggest names help him find a way to make it click and integrate everyone as well as they can?
Well, I think this will probably be one of the biggest reasons why the FA have gone for Thomas Tuchel and a foreign coach, is because I think they feel that between now and the next World Cup, they've got some of the best players in world football, certainly in attacking areas, and that array of talent deserve a super coach, if you like. And also, there might be something in the fact that they're looking at the situation with Harry Kane. Now, Harry Kane knows Thomas Tuchel really well. And I think it'd be really interesting to see if Harry Kane's still England's out-and-out centre-forward or first-choice centre-forward by the time the next tournament comes round. And if he is, which I hope he is, because I love him to bits, he's a fantastic player. But I don't see him going past that tournament at all. And I think it'll be a real sort of fight, maybe with whoever's sort of breaking through next season for that shirt next summer. Because he's found it tough in the last tournament, Harry Kane. And maybe it's a case of, okay, we want a great manager for Harry Kane, Bellingham, Cole Palmer, Phil Foden, Saka, Declan Rice in midfield. Because the World Cup is our one real big chance. Because after that, it might be tough for England to have a world-class centre-forward as what they've had in the last sort of 6 or 7 years. And that's been one of the biggest reasons why England have done so well in the last 4 tournaments, as well as being the goals of Harry Kane.
But yeah, picking up on Harry Kane, obviously he's a big fan, had a lot of praise for Tuchel yesterday. Do you think he'll be the happiest player in the dressing room and passing on what he knows to all the other players about him? Yeah,
listen, I'm sure he will. He had a great relationship. He had a great season. Harry Kane last season, Bayern Munich didn't particularly, but he got the goals that you'd expect. And I saw Thomas Tuchel's interview, press conference, where he said he hadn't spoken to Harry Kane. I find that very hard to believe that there was no contact at all between the two at some stage. And I've got no problem with it. If there was, I would expect that. The new incoming manager speaking to his captain. So I'm sure there was some sort of dialogue at some stage about Thomas Tuchel getting the job and how it would work, and maybe Harry Kane's thoughts, and maybe the FA spoke to Harry Kane, about what Thomas Tuchel was like as a manager. And again, if that was the case, that shouldn't be criticised. That should be welcomed. Why would you not get the opinions of everybody you possibly can, especially a player who's worked with a manager who's going to work with him in the future also. So yeah, I would have imagined that Harry Kane would be involved in some sort of talks with somebody.
I think you might be right there. What about the other players? I mean, how do you think they're going to be feeling? Because he's an elite manager. You were in the England squad when Fabio Capello was appointed, for example.
Yeah, and I think when you're a player, you look from a selfish point of view, and you think, maybe, can this man make us successful? And what can this man do for me as an individual? And that's certainly what I thought with Fabio Capello, because I was in love with, his team, that AC Milan team at the late 80s, early 90s, and the players he managed. And I'm thinking, going into the England squad, I don't care whether it's a foreign manager or not. I want to know about Maldini or Baresi. I want to know the training sessions these players did, the influence he had on them. Could he have a similar influence on me? Could I take something back to Liverpool that was something new or different? So I think the players will be really excited. I think they'll look at it and think, we've got a Champions League winning manager. And could this be the difference that, gets us over the line to win a major tournament? Because, any England team or manager who win a major tournament, and with the next one being a World Cup, will be legends forever.
Yeah. What about Tuchel and his sort of personality and how he is? He's not afraid to upset people, is he? Did it PSG and Bayern? How do you think he'll fit in with the FA?
Well, listen, Thomas Tuchel's got to be himself. He's passionate. I love that. I loved him in the Premier League. I couldn't believe Chelsea got rid of him. I think that was a huge help to all the other big clubs at the time, because, we talk about the Klopp and Guardiola era. I mean, probably two of the best teams we've probably ever seen in the Premier League, those two teams, the quality and the points they were getting. Chelsea were the team who pushed those two the closest. And you see him here with Conte. I was actually commentating that day, and I wasn't sure whether I was allowed to say it, but I said, I'm absolutely loving this. Because, again, we're showing it a few years later. These are big talking points, major moments in, the Premier League that we look back and, people might say, oh, you shouldn't see this on a football pitch, but it's a passionate game. And we all feel very strongly about it. And Thomas Tuchel's no different. So he will bring unbelievable passion, even though he's a German, to the English national team. He'll be passionate about every other job he's had. And I don't think the England national team will be any different. So I look forward to seeing him on the touchline getting wound up in a World Cup quarter-final.
As long as no one
hopefully semi-final and final.
Yeah, aim big, yeah. those little squabbles there. At least, you know, it was only feelings that were hurt, neither of them two at least. Let's talk about these incredible stats that England fans will be clinging on to, because he is known as a cup specialist. Made it to the final of every cup competition he entered at Chelsea. Do you think that'll make his transition to the international game a lot smoother? He knows how that path works and what it takes to get to that end point.
This, for me, is the biggest bonus of having Thomas Tuchel as the England manager. In knockout football, whether it's international football or club football, you need an element of luck to win a cup competition. But you also need to navigate individual games. And Thomas Tuchel is the master at that. Even last season, he was basically a minute away from getting to the Champions League final with a really average and poor Bayern Munich team who had a really poor season. But as I said, he nearly got to that Champions League final. You know what he did at Chelsea, taking on Pep Guardiola in a final and getting the better of him. And I think sometimes that's what it maybe comes down to. Maybe where we have been lacking with Gareth, who I think did a brilliant job, that in those finals that we've been in, the other managers maybe just had the upper hand with them. Whether from, you know, the teams picked tactically, how they've been set up, substitutions, at what time you make those changes. So I think that's something where I'd be very surprised if Thomas Tuchel is outdone in that sense in a big tournament game in the next World Cup.